The little girl's voice stopped him mid-step. She couldn't have been more than 7, her small hands gripping the strap of a duct-taped pink backpack that looked ready to fall apart. Her brown hair was tangled, sticking to her cheek in the wind, and her sneakers were worn down at the toes. She tilted her head, studying the stranger with a mix of hope and boldness that only children carry. "Mommy's sick," she said, her voice soft yet steady. "But she'll still smile if you come to my party." The man blinked, caught between disbelief and curiosity. Why him? Why here, outside a grocery store on a Thursday night with snow dusting the cracked pavement? He crouched slightly to meet her eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lila," she said, hugging the backpack tighter.
"I'm turning 8.
"We don't have balloons or cake, but Mommy said we can make muffins. She gets tired, though, so—"
"Maybe if you came, she'd feel happy again." Her lips trembled, but she forced a smile, the kind of smile that looked borrowed from brighter days. The man, Eric, shifted uncomfortably.
He was in a charcoal coat, leather gloves still warm from the heated seats of his black Mercedes parked nearby. Inside the grocery store, he had just bought an overpriced bottle of wine and imported chocolates for a client dinner. He glanced at the plastic bag in his hand, then back at her. Something tugged at him, an invisible thread he couldn't shake. "Where's your mom now?" he asked. "She's home. Our light flickers a lot, so she has candles ready. She coughs a lot too, but she says it's nothing."
"I think it's something." Lila's eyes darted down, then back up.
"We live across the street. Apartment with the peeling blue door," Eric swallowed. He had seen that building, the kind most people hurried past. Windows stuffed with blankets instead of curtains, notices taped crookedly to doors, shadows moving behind paper-thin walls. He wanted to excuse himself, say something kind but final, and walk away. But Lila's small figure stayed rooted in the cold, not begging, just asking him to witness her little world. Inside the apartment, the air was damp and carried the smell of stale coffee. A flickering bulb buzzed overhead, throwing shadows across the narrow living room. The fridge rattled softly, but when Eric opened it, his chest tightened. A carton of milk almost empty, 2 eggs, a jar of pickles, and a bag of wilted lettuce. That was all. Her mother, Claire, sat propped up on a second-hand couch with a blanket over her legs. Even in her fragility, there was a cinematic grace about her. Her cheekbones sharp but beautiful, her dark hair pulled back in a messy knot. She wore a faded sweater, sleeves rolled up past slender wrists, and when she looked at Eric, her gaze was steady despite the weariness under her eyes. "You must be wondering what my daughter's dragged you into," she said, her voice raspy, yet calm. Eric found himself shaking his head. "No, she invited me to a party." Claire laughed softly, then broke into a cough that bent her shoulders. Lila hurried to her side, patting her hand. "See? She smiles more when people come," the girl whispered. Re-hook, Eric could have left then. He should have. But his eyes fell again on the duct-taped backpack near the door, the crayon drawings taped to the wall, the thrift store lamp with a crooked shade, and the eviction notice curling on the coffee table's corner. It was the contrast that crushed him. He had walked out of a warm cafe only hours earlier, polished shoes clicking on marble, while here, a mother and child tried to celebrate life with almost nothing. "Lila says you're sick," he murmured carefully. Claire exhaled, brushing hair back from her temple.
"I'm managing. It's just a lung infection, maybe more."
"I haven't had the time or the money for doctors, but she doesn't need to know the details." Her lips curved faintly. "All she wants is a birthday." Lila beamed up at him, pulling a muffin pan from a cupboard. The cupboard doors squeaked, showing almost bare shelves, a half-empty bag of flour, sugar in a recycled jar, a single stick of butter wrapped in foil. She set them on the counter with pride like treasures. "We'll make muffins with chocolate chips," she said. "There aren't any chocolate chips, baby," Claire whispered gently. Lila froze, then shrugged, forcing cheer. then plain ones.
They'll still taste good. Eric felt something twist inside him.
His phone buzzed with a client reminder, the polished world pulling at him again, but it seemed unbearable to step back into it. He placed his grocery bag on the counter. "You know," he said, clearing his throat, "these chocolates might work just fine. We can chop them up." Lila's eyes widened, her mouth forming a perfect O. She bounced once on her toes. "Really? For the muffins?" Claire's throat tightened, but she nodded, blinking back moisture. Eric rolled up his sleeves, unfamiliar in this kitchen of cracked tiles and flickering light, but grounded in a way he hadn't felt in years. Lila cracked the eggs with clumsy joy, flour dusting the counter and her cheeks. Claire guided her from the couch, voice low but full of warmth. As the oven clicked on, the dim room filled with a fragile brightness, not from the bulb, but from the laughter threading between them. Yet beneath it all, Claire's coughing deepened, her shoulders quivering when she thought no one was watching. Eric noticed. Lila noticed too, though she pretended not to. By the time the muffins baked, the little girl leaned against Eric's arm, sleepy but stubbornly awake. Claire's gaze lingered on the sight, her daughter safe beside someone who didn't look away. But in her eyes flickered fear. She knew she couldn't hold on forever. The oven dinged, breaking the moment. Lila sat up quickly, clapping, but Claire pressed her hand to her chest, breath shallow, lips paling. She whispered, "Just give me a second." Her body sagged slightly on the couch, and the room seemed to still. Eric was on his feet before he even realized he had moved. Claire's chest rose shallowly, her fingers trembling as she tried to wave him off.
"It's fine," she rasped, forcing a thin smile.
"Just tired. Happens sometimes." But the words didn't match her body, and even Lila's brave little act cracked. The girl scrambled to her mother's side, clutching her hand, whispering, "Mommy, please don't scare me." The smell of warm muffins lingered, almost cruel in the tension. Eric knelt in front of Claire. "You need a doctor tonight." His voice was steady, but his stomach churned. Claire shook her head. "No insurance."
"No saving."
"Hospitals mean bills I can't pay."
"I won't put her through that." Eric glanced at the fridge again, at the peeling paint on the walls, at Lila's scuffed shoes by the door.
It wasn't just tonight. This had been years of slow erosion, a life held together by scraps and dignity. He rubbed his jaw, then made a choice he hadn't expected when he parked his Mercedes an hour ago.
"I'll cover it," he said quietly. Claire's brows pinched. "I can't accept charity." "It isn't charity," he countered.
"It's human decency." "Let me drive you both." Lila looked between them, her small face lit with hope and fear at once. "Mommy, please." Just this one time, the fight drained from Claire's shoulders. She closed her eyes, nodding faintly. "All right." At the hospital, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in cold clarity. Claire sat in a wheelchair, hair falling loose around her face, while Lila perched beside her, holding her hand. Eric stood nearby, awkward in his tailored coat but strangely unwilling to leave. He signed forms, handed over his card, answered questions when Claire's voice faltered. Doctors moved quickly after hearing her symptoms, whisking her away for scans and tests. That left Eric and Lila in the waiting area. She curled into one of the stiff plastic chairs, knees tucked under her chin. Her backpack sat in her lap, duct tape edges frayed. She whispered, "Do you think they'll fix her?" Eric leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "They'll try everything."
"That's what doctors do." Her eyes glistened.
"She always says she's fine, but I know she hides it. Grown-ups think kids don't notice, but..."
"I do." She sniffled and wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. Eric hesitated, then said softly, "You're stronger than most adults I know." She gave a small, crooked smile. "That's what she says too." Hours stretched.
Finally, a doctor approached. Claire had pneumonia complicated by an untreated condition, but with antibiotics and monitoring, she would recover. Relief swept over Lila so sharply she burst into tears, hugging Eric's arm like she'd known him forever. Claire was kept overnight, and Eric promised to drive Lila home. The apartment was colder now, emptier without her mother's presence. Eric tucked Lila into the couch with an extra blanket. She whispered, before drifting off. "Thank you for coming to my party." He stayed longer than intended, cleaning dishes, tossing spoiled food from the fridge, quietly leaving a bag of groceries he'd picked up on the way. When Claire returned home days later, thinner but steadier, she found the apartment subtly transformed. Fresh fruit in a bowl, lights that worked because Eric had spoken to the landlord, even a second-hand coat draped neatly by the door in Lila's size. Claire confronted him gently when he visited again. Why us? Her eyes held both suspicion and gratitude, her arms folded over her sweater. Eric took a breath. Because I could.
Because she asked me to, and because
I realized walking away would have haunted me more than anything. Claire studied him for a long moment. Then, with a grace that felt cinematic despite her worn clothes, she lifted her chin and said, "Then don't disappear on her." "She's had enough of people leaving," he nodded, throat tight. Over the weeks that followed, his visits became natural. Sometimes he arrived with groceries, sometimes just to sit and help Lila with homework. Claire regained her strength, her laughter returning in pieces, her beauty no longer shadowed by illness, but lit from within. Lila thrived on the attention, proudly showing Eric her drawings taped to the fridge. One evening, as the first snow settled over the city, Lila pressed a still warm muffin into his hand. "It's from our first party," she said with a grin. "But this time we had chocolate chips." Eric looked around the room, the cracked walls, the old furniture, but also the light in their eyes, the resilience stitched into everything, and felt a kind of wealth money couldn't buy.